Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Raptor Queens Podcast, the first woman-led Toronto Raptors podcast. I'm your host for today, Essie Magic, and I'm joined by Jade Hoops and Allison Hope. How are you ladies doing?
We're doing good.
Well,
Good. So today we have some really interesting topics on our docket because there's a lot going on in the league. So we've actually had a pretty eventful league this week. Definitely one of the things we're going to talk about is all of the various playoff formats that have come out that are rumored to be happening. We'll give you some news on some of the things that seem confirmed, and we'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages for the Raptors and what it means for them. Then we're going to go into some tea time. Tea time is going to be a little bit different because there is a lot of tea about the Last Dance documentary and the reaction that happened there. So we're going to go into some of the reactions from Scottie Pippen in our tea time. Then we are going to touch on Dame Lillard's comments about the league returning in our Around the League segment. And then we're going to finish off with some discussion about the state of what's happening in the US right now, and even actually in Canada in terms of police brutality and all of the sports stars we've seen get involved in that. So ladies, let's start. So a lot came out this week in terms of the playoffs, and which is exciting because we've all been waiting for news on if the NBA was going to return. And now it's looking like 99.9% it is returning. We don't have to wonder anymore. So that is definitely, it's really exciting to see that. But with that came a lot of different scenarios, some that are advantageous for the Raptors, some that aren't. So we are going to go through the 4 scenarios that seem to be on the table right now. Some things to note is that it's looking like July 31st is the targeted start date, according to Shams Charania. And then also next week, Thursday, the Board of Governors is going to vote for the actual format. And they're rumored to vote in favor of what Adam Silver wants. So a lot of progress happening here, or I should say progress, because that's the Canadian way. I know sometimes the being in the States, it switches things up. But yeah, so ladies, let's go through the different formats. We have 4 on the table. We'll speak to one first and give our discussion and then go to the next scenario. So the first one that we're seeing is a 1 through 16 seeding. I've seen some where they say they reseed every round, and then I've seen some where they don't reseed. They just, from 116 and then the brackets continue to go. So how that would work is that obviously there would be some sort of round robin before it starts. I've heard that they're looking at about 8 games for the round robin, and reason being is because they need to get to the 70. Most teams finished at 62 games, and they need to get to the 70 mark. One, because of local television deals, that apparently that's the threshold to fulfill some of the financial obligations for local television. And then also, too, they just figure that 8 is enough games to kind of prep and warm up as well. So if it is that 1 through 16 format, the Raptors would face the Grizzlies in the first round. And then potentially face the Nuggets versus Pacers the next round, potentially face the Lakers the next round, who are facing the Nets in the first round. And then in the finals, likely to be against the Bucks or Clippers or Celtics, who are all in the other brackets. So let's start with Jade. What do you think about that first format, the advantages, disadvantages for both the Raptors, as well as just, the league overall and even safety?
Yeah, so my initial reaction when I saw this, and I ended up writing a quick little article about it the other day, is that leave it to Adam Silver to turn COVID-19 lemons into lemonade by imagining a way you could have an all LA final potential. Like that to me is really the only reason to seed it that way reasonably. It's something that would be completely impossible other than the fact that COVID-19 shut down the season. And it's brilliant from a business standpoint, I think, because nobody would question doing it that much differently under the current circumstances. But other than that, I don't like it. I mean, it might just be that I'm used to the playoffs being seeded by conference and I'm not comfortable changing it, or I haven't been able to put my finger on exactly why. For the Raptors, I know that I wanted to see us against the Bucks because I think the overall consensus is there's no chance. We have no chance this year, by other NBA fans, of course. No chance against the Bucks this year now that Kawhi's gone. And I just don't believe that. Like, I don't say the Raptors would for sure win, but I also don't say the Bucks would for sure win, not by a long shot. I think Pascal has taken larger strides than Giannis in the past year, partially because Giannis was already closer to his ceiling than Pascal was. And I think Nick Nurse will coach circles around Coach Bud for days. So that would be my preferred one. In terms of either way, I still think the Raptors make the Final Four, whichever way they seed it. I don't see them going out before a semifinal round. I think the path is easier through the Eastern Conference because I think the Nuggets are going to wipe the floor with Indiana, frankly. And I would rather not have to go through the Nuggets to get to the finals.
Allison, what do you think?
So with this first scenario, I kind of see this as a net disadvantage for the Raptors. And I mean, aside from the obvious teams like the Lakers and the Clippers, I've got some pretty serious concerns about running into teams like Denver and Houston and Dallas. And I mean, maybe it's a case of the devil you know as opposed to the devil you don't know. I mean, not that the East is easy, Boston, Philly, but I mean, we've had difficulty beating Houston the last couple of years. I'm sure we remember that game one this year against them where we doubled Harden and then we surrendered just an onslaught of corner threes. Now, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, maybe that was some sort of Nick Nurse experiment, but that game was kind of painful to watch. And the Raptors would have played the second game against Houston in early April. And I know that we lost both games to them last year. And anyway, I'm not too convinced about this experiment with a 6'5", 35-year-old at center. But anyway, and just looking at Denver, I mean, they embarrassed us. I mean, we were without Fred and Serge, but I mean, there was Jokic. My God, that guy's skills, like he was on full display in that game. So just running into teams like that kind of worries me. So I see this scenario as not advantageous to us.
Interesting, because I actually saw this scenario as most advantageous to us. So I'm surprised you guys are saying that, just because I do think obviously the Grizzlies will win, but I actually think we can beat the Nuggets just because I feel like once it actually reaches the playoffs, experience will start to come in. And I just feel like with a healthy Mark and Serge, they'll find a way to, you know, at least limit the Joker. And so that is why I kind of didn't see the Nuggets as big of a threat. I just feel like when playoffs come, it's just a whole different thing. And I feel like the Raptors experience would win out. I do admit, though, I agree with you, Allison, that if for some reason the Rockets were to beat the Lakers and we have to face the Rockets in the semifinals before the finals, that is a scary matchup, just because we have struggled against them. And I just like James Harden, I just don't want to play against him. I just think he's too good. And I just think that he could, like, you know, and then obviously Russell Westbrook started coming alive as well. Remember before
he worries me.
Canceled. Yeah, before the season got canceled, he was coming alive in this new format where they don't have a real center. So I was like, I wouldn't want to play the Rockets. So we would need the Lakers to beat the Rockets for things to work according to plan. But yeah, other than that, I actually saw this path easier because we would avoid the Bucks and we would avoid the Celtics and even the Heat. The Heat can be a threat as well. We would avoid them till the finals. But then at the same time, I'm also not a fan of this because I think I'm like you, Jade. I just prefer the traditional East versus West conferences. It's just like there's no rivalry. Like, why would the Nuggets versus Raptors be exciting to watch? Like, it's just, there's no history there. You know what I mean? I think the only thing I like about this as well is, other than the Raptors' advantage I see, is that it excludes all the losing teams, because I'm one of those people who's not for the other teams coming back. You know what I mean? I think from a health and safety standpoint, I think it risks people catching the virus more, the more people you have involved. And I believe, how many people are in a traveling party for a team? Is it like 100 or something? Maybe they won't bring as many people, but I just feel like the less people, the less risk. And also too, it's like, we've already wasted so much time. So it's like, can we just get to the goods, which is the playoffs? I get, though, from a financial perspective, the league might not look at it that way, but yeah, but other
there's
than
also, sorry,
yeah.
there's also the perspective for not going straight to the playoffs. There was the race for 7th and 8th in both conferences was very, very tight. So I understand those teams feel in some kind of way about, we had a chance and now we're not even going to get the chance to see if we can make that jump into a playoff spot, when it would have been entirely possible for probably 5 or 6 teams across the league between the two conferences.
Yeah, and that actually ties into our third scenario. So we might as well go into that right now, which is a playoff kind of tourney for the 8th seed. So the teams that were really close going into, like, before the season ended. In the East, it didn't really look so much like any teams could get in. I think Washington is about 5.5 games behind. But in the West, it was different because it was literally one game to, like, really close race between the Pelicans, between Portland, between the San Antonio Spurs, and then Memphis holding that 8th seed. And I believe there was one other team that was Sacramento.
The Kings.
Yeah, Sacramento, that was in the running. So I don't know. So I'm against anything that brings back anyone other than the 16 teams, as we touched on in that first scenario. But so Jade, what do you think about, you mentioned it being unfair to some of those teams. So are you in favor of, you know, this sort of play-in tournament, which would mean that about 20 to 22 teams end up coming back? Not all 30, just up to 22, I believe, they're floating 20 to 22. I've heard some 24, but it's looking like 20 to 22. So Jade, yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, overall, I'm just at a point where it's like, give me as much basketball as possible before the season ends. Especially because professionally, my range in basketball is very much generally the league, even though I'm a Raptors fan first. And I miss basketball so much. I kind of just want, like, give me as much as you can dump on me before it's off season again. But in terms of, do I think it's super beneficial? I mean, like I said, I understand those teams feeling like we had a shot, especially some of those teams that haven't been playoff teams for a while. Like, I feel like the Kings haven't been a playoff team in a minute. And for them to have worked hard enough to be within striking distance and it be taken away, I feel for them. But in terms of just getting it done, and like you said, safety, I think it probably makes sense just to go right into the playoffs. And that was kind of, I recorded on South to the Six with Adam Corsair the day after the NBA shut down. And we said at the time too, that it just seems like it would be more likely just to go straight into playoffs from the seeding as it is. So I don't know. I can't make up my mind. I keep going back and forth. So I'm not super useful on that question.
No fence sitters is what I always say on this podcast. You know what? I just don't feel bad for the teams. It's like, these are unique circumstances. I feel like they need to just understand that nobody expected a big pandemic and things won't be perfect. So too bad, so sad. You waited too long to, make a run. Like, the season was going to be done soon anyway. I mean, how much more time would you have had anyway? So I don't know. I'm not for that one. Allison, what do you think?
Okay, so funny you should bring that up, because I want to jump in on that. And I just want to say, like, at the beginning of the year, I kind of thought there was parity between the East and the West, like, early on. But now it's pretty clear that a lot of the heavyweights are in the West. And I mean, notwithstanding Brooklyn without Katie and Kyrie. But anyway, this scenario would be definitely more fair for the Western Conference. I mean, like you said, there's 4 teams within 4 games of the 8th seed. And looking at two of those teams, I mean, the Pelicans were without Zion for the first, 30, 35 games. So, like their record is not indicative of the team they are today. And the other thing is for Portland, who I kind of have a soft spot for, I mean, they're getting Nurkic back most likely. So, I mean, looking at their record, assuming he'd been with the team, I mean, they probably would have been higher seeded. So this would definitely be way more fair for them. I see it as disadvantageous for the Raptors, just because some of those teams, like fighting for that 8th seed in the West, are like pretty tough teams. And series could get ugly. Like I'm looking at Sacramento and New Orleans. Like I think those would be tough outs. I think it would be disadvantageous too, because it would probably mean obviously more games. And like you said, Essie, the bubble is going to be that much bigger. And it's interesting what you said about the bubble for each team being, what did you say, like 100 maybe? And then you add in all the league people, the referees, the sound people, all the techs, the culinary people. Like the bubble's getting bigger and bigger, and it's just like more risk every time you add another team. So, I mean, that notwithstanding, I think I don't like this scenario for the Raptors either.
Yeah, and if I was Memphis, I'd be pissed at this. I would vote no in this. Why would I want to put my team? We're sitting in the 8th seed. I wouldn't want to. So then it becomes unfair for Memphis and then Orlando in the East as well. Although their chances of losing their spot are much lower. It's always unfair for somebody. You know what I mean? But I feel like we should reward the teams that have been playing well already, instead of like I feel less bothered rewarding the teams that have already done well versus feeling sympathy for the teams who already weren't doing well. Does that make sense? So
I get that too. Another thing that I saw mentioned was another business aspect of it, which we have to remember it always is. Zion was the hype coming into the season, and then he didn't play for the first chunk of the season. He started out finally when he started and completely lived up to expectations in terms of the kind of player. He exceeded my expectations actually, because I didn't know he could step back and shoot the three like he did his first couple of games. Mm-hmm. And now, again, like the introduction of Zion to the NBA has been completely derailed. And I saw something where I can't remember who it was, but it was some NBA personality, not media, but somebody that works in a front office saying, there's no way the playoffs go on, or there's no way the season finishes without including Zion in some way. So I think if we're going to try and think about what is likely to happen, I really think the Pelicans having a chance to play again is a likely scenario in terms of just the business aspect of making sure Zion gets some more run in his rookie season, which has already been a disaster for no fault of his own.
Wouldn't that be though, like, even in terms of more people, more risk, I feel like more games, more risks too. Like, what if something happens again? Are they going to shut it down before we even reach the playoffs again? And then we're back to square one. So I don't know. I just don't see, because then when you argue that, then it's like, well, okay, well, might as well bring back all the teams so that people can see Trae Young, people can see Steph Curry. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I would rather play it safe, and it might be because I miss basketball. I just want us to successfully finish the season. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not for it. Allison, do you have anything to add there?
No, I mean, I can certainly see that point of view too. But I mean, having been through so many injuries this year, I mean, I kind of feel bad for these teams that were dealing with injuries. So, but I mean, a decision has to be made, and it sounds like it's going to be the one we're going to look at last, right?
I think so. Let me throw out one other scenario. which is the most far-fetched scenario, which I saw Dominic Foxworthy speaking about this on ESPN, which is a World Cup style type of setup. So it would be 4 groups, 4 teams per group, and it would be, so that means top 16. And then just like how in the World Cup you have the round robin, and the top 2 teams advance to the playoffs. So the playoffs would only have 8 teams instead of 60 because the other teams have now been eliminated. And then the seeding for the playoffs is based on the results of that round robin. Yeah, it's the most far-fetched one. And to be honest, I don't really know where it's rooted in. But some people say it could be more exciting because, you know, getting to see, it's like there's so much put on the games because it's like, if you don't get, I believe you usually have less games in the round robin as well. And then again, you open up the possibilities of seeing teams that haven't played against each other play against each other. Yeah. So what do you guys think of that one?
I don't like it. I just think it negates. I don't think they should pick an option that makes it so that most of what was done before the shutdown doesn't matter. And that's kind of what I feel like it does. Like, I don't know, like, especially with the Raptors having managed to still have the 3rd best record in the league without Kawhi and with constant injuries. I feel like that should be honored. And I don't think that particular option accomplishes that.
Allison?
I definitely don't like it. I see this as disadvantageous to the Raptors. And just like, I just remember discussion about the World Cup and these groups of death with like Brazil and Germany and Holland. And then, so I looked at the standings, and so it would be entirely plausible based on the standings for the Raptors to be in a group of 4 with, say, Houston or Dallas, 6 or 7 seed, Denver, and Philly. Now, that's a group of death. That would be a very difficult group to come out of unbruised. So I don't like it.
Yeah, I think we're unanimous on that one. I just think it's just too risky to penalize the teams who've already put so much effort in the whole season, and they especially because the teams don't have as much time. Like, their training camp is not going to be as you know, or at least from what I hear, it's not going to be as much easy a transition with the regular training camp, because from that you usually go into regular season. You're going straight from training camp again, or new training camp, right to the playoffs. And I think it leaves too much room for, you know, one team to just be having a great shooting night. That happens, you know, good teams will have bad shooting nights, threes are not falling, and then next thing you know, a team that shouldn't be going as far is like can you imagine if the Lakers lost in the first round? It would be a riot. The league would be so upset, you know what I mean? So I just think it leaves too much to chance. So we'll move on from that one, because I feel like that one's kind of unanimous in not doing that one. So this leaves us with our final. Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, since we did unlikely ones, I did see an unlikely one that I liked just before we started. So I want to see what you guys think. So this was from, I think, NBC News, and it was just the writer kind of spitballing, here's what the NBA should do. So his thing was that it should be the top 16 teams seeded by conference, which we talked about, but that the rest of the teams left in the league should play their own bracket, and the prize is lottery picks. So the teams that win, the team that wins gets the first pick, and so on and so forth. And the reason I like this is because I hate the way the lottery is set up so that you get rewarded for being crappy. I think it should work that you have to earn it, not by tanking, but by earning it some way. So the idea that you would have to play a tournament and you get your lottery picks based on where you land in the tournament, I liked that idea.
Does the tournament include playoff teams, or just the
No, just outside of the top 16. Everybody else plays for lottery picks.
So then a team like you know, the Pelicans or the Spurs, who are already just out of the playoffs, but just maybe one piece away, could end up getting Can you imagine if the Pelicans got a top draft pick? They just got Zion, and now you're gonna add another in 2-3 years. They're running the league, a super team right there. You know what I mean? Plus, they still have Brandon Ingram if he stays. So it's just, oh my goodness, I don't like that one at all. I don't know, Allison, what do you think of that one? Allison?
Oh, she's gone again.
So we'll come back to her on that one. But yeah, I'm not a fan of that scenario. I think I did briefly read something like that, but then I just dismissed it so fast because I was like, no, like.
I just like the idea of having a system where you have to, like, one of the things I don't like about the NBA is that organizations, as organizations, talking about executives in front office, don't have any impetus to get better, because the worse you are, the better lottery picks you're going to get. I've thought of other things, like I've had other conversations, but that's for another time. But that was the thing that appealed to me about it. Maybe it's probably not the best format, because you made some good points, Essie, but I like the idea that you don't get rewarded for being the worst.
All the work that Golden State put into being last. Steph Curry literally had the worst hand injury in the history of hand injuries. I've never seen a hand injury that was reportedly so bad he had to miss so much of the season. All that work for nothing. Well, who knows? If he's at his best, they could be one of the top teams again. They could be one of the top teams both ways in terms of having lost so much, but then now being able to win. So who knows? Allison, I know that you had, you had briefly stepped away, but did you want to add anything to this scenario of the remaining teams competing in order to get the top lottery pick in the draft?
Yeah, as far as that goes, I can't really see that happening. So yeah, no.
Okay. So that leads to our final scenario, which is just the normal conferences, East versus West. However, it's still only the playoff teams return, and there's still some sort of round robin beforehand. Like we mentioned before, we've heard things like 8 games. I've also heard having certain teams play against teams that they wouldn't likely meet in the playoffs. So lots of East teams playing West teams for the round robin and vice versa. So I think we're probably going to favor this, but let's hear what you guys think. We'll start with you, Allison. So
yeah, I definitely prefer this scenario. I think it's advantageous for the Raptors. And I kind of started out by saying that, we've got good scouting and it's inherently advantageous for us. And then I thought, well, if it's advantageous for everyone, then it's an advantage for nobody. So I just think for this scenario, it does shield us from some of those heavy hitters in the Western Conference. So I like it for that. And it does expose a couple of the things that I think are an advantage to us. We definitely have one of the more stable rosters in the East over the last, say, 4 or 5 years. Kawhi, DeMar, and Jonas and Danny Green notwithstanding. I mean, we have the same core: Fred, Kyle, Serge, Pascal. So I think that's a great advantage. And we also have an innovator and a savant as an alchemist as a coach. So I think that's an advantage. And a rested Marc Gasol, with his creaky hamstrings, fresh off playing 11 months of basketball. I think having him rested and just Nick Nurse having that option at the 5 spot, it's a whole different look. So I think this gives us an advantage.
Cool. Jade, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I feel similar to Allison, and mainly for me, it is about Nick Nurse. I think he, in terms of coaching, is more prepared to deal with teams he's unfamiliar with than maybe any other coach in the league. Because he is just on a basic level so creative, and he enjoys the creativity. Most coaches do not look at the level of injuries like the Raptors have had over the last couple seasons as a fun challenge. It's something that is fine, we have to deal with it, but it's not something to be embraced. And I think because Nick Nurse embraces the challenge of things being different from one time to the next, he's going to have an advantage in a series where we are playing teams we wouldn't otherwise meet. And because the players are also so bought into that creativity, I think I think the Raptors are going to bring more unexpected to the teams we're unfamiliar with than vice versa.
So then in that case, wouldn't it mean that this format is bad because now we're playing all the teams we're used to?
You said for the round robin, it's other teams, right?
Oh, okay. You're talking about the round robin. Okay. Yeah. So I believe the round robin wouldn't impact any of the standings or anything. It would just be like,
it's just to get them ready.
Yeah. Just to get them ready and stuff like that. But you did mention a good point in terms of Nick Nurse's coaching. Like, I think that, just in general for all the teams, being able to play teams you're more used to, it'll be easier versus having to come up with whole new strategy for, let's say it was that 1 through 16 and the Raptors face the Nuggets. But like you said, yeah, in those scenarios, I think Nick Nurse would be well equipped to adapt to a team the Raptors haven't played much in. And also too, just in terms of the conference, like there's more history and rivalry. You know what I mean? Like we want to see the Raptors face, the Bucks or
the Celtics.
Yeah, the Celtics.
Especially after all the Last Dance that is still fresh in a lot of NBA players' minds. I feel like the playoffs would feel flat without any kind of rivalry matchups.
Yeah, we have no history with Memphis. Yeah, we have no history with Nuggets. We maybe a little with LeBronto or whatever. But that's a different team. It was the Cleveland Cap. It wasn't like the Lakers. I just consider it different. So yeah, I think being able to play the teams they're used to. I think Giannis is going to be on a mission to beat Toronto. Philly is going to be on a mission as well, whether they end up facing Toronto or not. And the Celtics are in the mix. They're always a big name. And even just seeing, even just seeing the Heat and everything Jimmy Butler wants to prove, and even in regular season games, there was a lot of energy. So imagine the playoffs, because we knew those are the teams those are our rivals. So I just think that it's just better. And also too, lastly, is that there's already going to be a big asterisk on this season. People are going to be like, oh, it was whoever wins. It was the one year when, teams didn't get to prepare as much and all this stuff. We didn't finish out the regular season games. So it's like, I don't want to add yet another thing on to make the asterisk even bigger. Like, oh, that year when they did the 1 through 16 and, so I'll just keep talking. Oh, like that year when they did the 1 through 16 and, we as Raptor fans already know what it's like to have a major asterisk always, and it's annoying. So I don't want to add in another thing onto there. But you could still mix this format with the play-in tournament. So maybe it is a mix of this, keeping the conferences the same, but then still having that play-in tournament for that extra revenue that would come in. So I think I'm definitely all for just keeping the conferences the same. And also too, I just don't think the East teams will vote for, like, why would I vote to mix it up? You know what I mean?
That's a really good point. Like as all the powers that be that are going to be involved in that vote, it's not a smart move for the Eastern Conference owners and GMs and whoever's involved to be like, yeah, let's reseed regardless of conference. Like it's not a smart move, and we know that those guys are not dumb that are going to be involved in that. So I don't like. That's another good point that I had forgot to mention. That's a big reason why I don't see that happening that way.
Exactly. All right. I feel like we could probably move to our next segment unless any of you guys have any final comments to add.
I'm good.
Actually, I was just, when I was sitting down looking at the standings and stuff, then I was kind of tired because I worked nights last night, and I went down this tangent about, I wonder who are the top 3 coaches in the league. So I got off on this crazy tangent, but that'll have to be a subject for another time.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting for sure to see the coaches and what they end up doing, because this is really not just going to test the players and how ready they are. It's going to test the coaches. Any teams who have suspect coach, like for me, I think Budenholzer is suspect Like, I know he's won coach of the year and stuff, but I just don't think he's as good. So I feel like coaches like him, it's going to definitely test if that's legit or not.
I think Quinn Snyder is suspect too.
So yeah, the overrated coaches, I would say, we'll see what happens now that they have these changes. So we are now going to go into some tea time, which is going to look a little different because a lot of the tea this week and in the past couple of weeks have revolved around The Last Dance. So we thought we would use that this week. So Jade, why don't you take us into tea time?
Yeah, so now that The Last Dance has finished and we've come to the end of the story, unsurprisingly, some of the people involved whose names were not Michael Jordan feel some kind of way about the way that they were portrayed and the way the stories were told. Scottie Pippen, probably most notably, important to note that he has not, from what I've been able to see, specifically spoken publicly about his feelings, but he has been quoted as being livid about how he was portrayed. And I can't really blame him. Horace Grant has been vocal. What he said was that the documentary was largely entertainment and 90% BS. So clearly Michael Jordan's memory of how things went down is a lot different than other people's. There's also been proof that he lied in the documentary. He said that he had nothing to do with Isaiah Thomas being left off the Dream Team. But there is recording of him telling somebody in an interview that he wasn't going to play on the Dream Team if Isaiah Thomas was included. So just a little bit of blowback in terms of what was said and how things were portrayed. And I personally, I'm not surprised because I felt like Jordan came off looking pretty bad, and knowing that that was the edit that he approved, I'm just like, I wonder what was left on the cutting room floor. It also makes me wonder what wasn't included in the interviews of the other players, like Scottie Pippen, like Horace Grant. What were the things that they said that didn't make the documentary that are going to make them feel like it is not, and it's a fiction. It's Michael Jordan's fiction of what happened rather than a documentary that should be taken seriously, because clearly they're not taking it seriously.
There is a lot to unpack there. And
right?
I don't know if my opinion is going to be a biased opinion. I have a feeling there will be some bias in there. I can see why they would be upset about what was put in there, because there were some portrayals that weren't good for them. They came out in some ways not looking good. So I wouldn't like that either. But then at the same time, that's just life. Like, people remember things differently. You know what I mean? Then they should do their own documentary. Scottie, where's your documentary? You can tell your story. What about you?
That's what I was thinking. Scottie needs to do his own now if he really feels that strongly about it. But I also did notice the fact that, like, I totally agree with you. People do remember things differently, but I find it very telling that Michael Jordan didn't have both sides of that spectrum in terms of, here's the things that Scottie did that were selfish or that I didn't like, or that he didn't play through his migraine or whatever, but never the acknowledgement of how much he helped him. And I think it might come down to the fact that MJ thinks it doesn't matter who was there, but I still think it would have gone a long way for Pippen to have also an acknowledgement of the fact that, look, I was your teammate, I was your number two, I had your back, a lot more times than I didn't.
No, because I think that Michael Jordan has already praised Scottie Pippen so much outside of the documentary. I mean, I thought Scottie Pippen had some good moments in the documentary as well. It showed how valuable he was to the team. Like, Michael Jordan has already said, you know, if it wasn't for Scottie Pippen, you know, we wouldn't been able to achieve as much as we did. So I just feel like No, I just had like, how much praise do you need? It's not even your documentary at the end of the day. Like, I feel like it was a fair documentary because it showed positives and negatives of every player, including Michael. So I will touch though on the thing you mentioned about that lie about the Isaiah Thomas thing. Okay, yes, that was a lie, clearly. But it doesn't really affect how I view Michael still, because and it actually reminds me of another Michael, because it reminds me Michael Jackson, because I used to be a major Michael Jackson fan, and then I remember he went on TV in that interview and said he'd only had two nose jobs, right? And that was obviously a lie. So it kind of reminds me of that, where you're a fan of lies and you're just like, you know, you kind of just, your bias just still wins out. Unfortunately, I have a bias. I'm a Michael Jordan fan, and I understand why he lied about that. So I'm not going to hold it against him.
For me, anytime somebody is caught in a large, blatant lie like that, my brain goes, what else is he lying about? Because now his credibility is shot.
Yeah, and you might be right. I mean, he has, there's probably a lot of lies. You know, a lot of famous people tell lies because of the pressure, and that doesn't mean it's right. But I don't know. I'm just grateful he revealed a lot of information about himself, you know? So overall, I just appreciate the documentary as a whole, regardless.
Well, you know, we all like lie, right? It's a human thing.
That's a good point. Yeah, I totally agree with Allison. Like, people always lie.
Like psychologists say that, like it's the human
be
condition.
Smart enough to lie in ways that can't be proved wrong.
Jade, oh yes.
Jade, have you not ever lied?
I don't get caught. I don't lie about stuff I was recorded saying the opposite thing of.
Okay. Yeah, you have to be strategic.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. He made a mistake there. He made a boo-boo with being caught. Okay, so switching over to the next topic, which is actually kind of related to the first topic, but we wanted to give it its own thing because we usually have our Around the League segment. We wanted to touch on Dame Lillard saying that if his team doesn't have a real shot to make the playoffs, he just doesn't even want to play. Is he right or wrong? What do you guys think? Allison, oh, sorry.
No, Jade, go ahead. Go ahead, Jade.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So I don't blame him. I have a hard time blaming him for like not wanting to play if his team's not going to, especially because we know Dame and the Trailblazers, what they're trying to prove is about the playoffs. It's been that way since last season. It was that way the season before, where they're trying to prove that they have what it takes to get to the Western Conference Finals. And since that has been his focus all season, I understand wanting to be like why would I show up and do that if there's no chance I get to the goal I've been working towards all year long. On the other hand, I think he's delusional to think that he's getting to the Final Four in the Western Conference any given year. Like, I think his belief, I know he believes that they are capable of it. I don't think he is realistic based on the teams they have to go up against, based on the fact that they do not have much in terms of a bench to come in the playoffs. So like, to me, it's like, I get that you don't want to play unless you make the playoffs, but frankly, your team is playoff fodder anyways. So kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I guess.
Allison, what do you think?
Oh, that's the harsh, cold reality, Jade, right there. I'm a huge Damian Lillard fan. He's like kind of like a fiercely independent guy. And I mean, I think, did he not make a comment maybe last year or the year before about sometimes winning isn't the only thing? Like he's a superstar in a small market city. And maybe he's a little bit of an anachronism, like like DeMar was. Like, he wants to spend his career playing in one place. So I kind of have mixed feelings, though, because on the other hand, I mean, he's a professional, and as a professional, you have to step up and you have to put in effort and you have to be a professional. And those of us who are professionals in our day-to-day lives, um, there are some days it's not fun, but it's called being a professional. So I'm kind of divided on that.
Yeah, I mean, I could see why he wouldn't want to, but yeah, I agree with you, Allison. At the end of the day, it's his job, and he's got to do what his job requires or quit. That's how it, that's just what it is. So I totally see why he wouldn't. It doesn't. It's like it's a valid point. If I was in his position, I wouldn't want to either. And even as a star player too, star players are allowed more, leeway than role players. Yeah, I just feel like if the NBA requires that of him or asks him to do that, I feel like he should do it.
So would he get fined then? Like, I wonder if he would like hold the line and it escalate to, well, you're getting fined. Like, I wonder how willing he is to like stand on principle.
I feel like that's probably would be at the discretion of the team, whether or not he gets fined. I think he should. If the team goes back on the floor and he just says, "Nah, I'm not doing it." Like, if the format they pick means that they are included, I think he should. If that's the way it goes, I think that's a reasonable thing. If he wants to make that kind of stand, he should back it up with his wallet.
Right. I think if he did get fined, it would be from the NBA and not from the team, because I feel like the team probably wouldn't want him to play anyway because they don't want him to get injured. And they might just put a bunch of the young guys on to just like practice and assess who earns a contract at the end of the year and all that stuff. So I could totally see the teams like being on his side. His team being on his side.
The reason I said that is because I'm just thinking about any other suspension or not suspensions, any fines from players that like missed practice or blah, blah, blah. And that always happens within the team. It's not the NBA that hands out those fines historically. Like, I can't think of any examples that it wasn't the team when a player has missed a game or a practice or something like that.
So the reason why I see this as different is because I don't think the team wants him to play. So I totally get what you're saying. Yes, I've seen that when there's mispractices and things like that, or disconduct or whichever. But I don't think the team wants him to play. So they're going to find any excuse to not fine him.
What about CJ McCollum then? Like,
yeah, I'm looking at it as how these teams just want to prep for next season. You know what I mean? Like, I think that they would rather not have them risk injury. I think that if they don't have a chance to make it in the playoffs anyway, why would you want to risk them making injury, right? Or having injury, right? So, I mean, I've seen the NBA fine teams for, I remember they fined the Clippers because Kawhi, there was some misconduct about his injury and stuff at the beginning when they weren't used to the load, or the NBA didn't expect him to have the load management this early in the season or something like that. So that's why I liken it closer to the NBA putting their foot down, because at the end of the day, they do need ratings and they do want the players out there to play to make up the revenue. But in terms of the actual team, I think the team, kind of like what we saw with Steph Curry and how they were holding him out, like the Golden State Warriors were holding him out so much longer than he needed to be held out because they just didn't want to risk it, like him getting injured again. So I just think the teams would be on his team would be on his side to rest him or not have him risk injury.
I think I agree with that. I think the team would be, but I think because of that, I think he would be outside of a fine. The NBA fined the Clippers not because he was on load management, because they gave him his load management schedule before the season even started. So they knew he was going to be on load management. They fined the Clippers specifically because Doc Rivers said, "Oh, Kawhi's fine," after he was out on load management, and the NBA had issued an official release saying, "Here's why he's not quite healthy." So it was really the NBA saying, "Listen, Doc, we gave you what you wanted. You've got your star player on load management, and then you said the opposite thing and made us look bad." So it was an optics thing. It wasn't the player's not available in a time we didn't know. So I think you're right. I think it would be the smart thing for the Blazers to not want him to play. But I kind of feel like if he doesn't play, he's going to avoid a fine, because I don't think the NBA is going to fine them for it.
I mean, I don't think there'll be any fines at all. I'm just going based off of what are the odds of if it would be the team, or, I just don't think the team would fine him. I just think if there were to be any fine at all, it would be something the NBA does to enforce the players playing. That's just my take. I just don't think, I don't think the team will fine him. I don't know. But we are running out of time, and I wanted to touch on a topic that is very important, especially with what is going on. And we felt like we should touch upon it because, it's one of those things, how can you ignore it? And this is referring to the incidents going on in the US right now with the death of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all these people who have been victims of racism and police brutality. And so we wanted to touch on it, one, because it's an important issue, but two, because we've been seeing a lot of athletes speak up about this. And we think it's important to talk about how it's impacting the players, the league, and just overall look at, the impact it has when people like LeBron and Steph Curry and even Kat was out, and Steven Jackson, who knew George really well. So let's touch briefly on, how we see the impact of these players talking about what's going on and how important it is, given the what's going on in the country. And actually, even in Toronto, we've heard of some incidents too. So not just US, but also Canada. And we'll start with Allison.
So to be a fan of the NBA, I think the NBA is the most progressive league as far as allowing players to have a voice. You look at LeBron, and he's like an exemplary leader. He's an exemplary dad, husband. He's philanthropic. He's a businessman, and his words have weight. And I don't know that he's spoken publicly, but when people like LeBron step up, and Steph Curry and Adam Silver, that's powerful, and people listen to those voices. So, and they definitely have their voices are essential in this conversation.
Jade?
Yeah, I agree. I think NBA players have an awareness that it could have been them. Had they been on a different path in life, it could have been somebody in their family, a dad, an uncle, a brother, a sister, whatever. And I think because of that, they feel like it is important to be vocal. And when I think about the fans of the NBA, right, being an NBA fan crosses all of those kinds of barriers of race and class and socioeconomic situation. It's something that we have in common. And I think when the NBA players make a point of stepping up and having a voice, I think it makes people take notice that might not otherwise. And that's going to be a big part of getting the problem solved, is the people who are contributing to the problem by their not doing anything about it. I think when people who have fans and followers like NBA players do make the point to say, listen, this is not okay, it's going to help some of those people take notice who might otherwise have just sat back and considered it not really my problem.
I agree, for sure. I feel like they are in a position of influence, and if they can use that position to better society, I think that 100% they should do that. And it's also heartwarming to see people come together to unite against you know, a terrible injustice that's happening right now. So I think that also, like, through all the negative you're seeing and how terrible and hopeless it feels, when you see these people speak up, I feel like it does help people to feel hope and feel like there is a light at the end of the tunnel and that we can do something. Yeah, so unless do you ladies have anything else to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, to your point of the coverage you're seeing of what is the riots in Minneapolis. My co-host on Hardcore Honeys lives in Minnesota, not too far from Minneapolis. And I think it's important for people to remember that it's not the protesters burning down buildings. I saw some news coverage on it just this morning, and what they were reporting is that most of the people doing the rioting part of it are not even from the state. They're coming in from out of state, and they're just causing problems. So it's one of those, yeah, it's one of those things where it's always, oh, you're protesting, how is burning down stuff helping? Well, it's not really the protesters doing the burning down of things. And I think it's important for people who are skeptical to have the right information when it comes to that kind of thing. If you're gonna have an opinion on the entire picture, make sure you see the entire picture clearly.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. I think that's exactly what it is people are so quick to judge from the footage. And honestly, that's why it helps so much that we're in the day of cell phones and social media, because we're able to record the truth, right? And capture these injustices, capture these other groups suddenly getting involved, wearing all black and you know, smashing buildings and things like that. So yeah, that's a good point. So with that being said, we do, Raptor Queens, want to send our love and well wishes to the families of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and really anybody who's been, you know, who has a family member that's been a victim of racial injustice, police brutality, systemic racism. We want to send our warm wishes to them and also to everybody to try and stay safe in these times. With that being said, I think that wraps up this episode. We want to thank all our viewers for listening. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Raptor Queens and Instagram. We do respond to all the comments pretty much, so definitely interact with us on there. And then in terms of listening to the podcast, you can also listen to it on our main Buzzsprout page or Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, or iHeartRadio, pretty much on most of the big platforms. So yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching. And oh, sorry, I said watching because I'm watching them on the Zoom recording. Thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed our episode today, and take care. Bye.
Bye.
We the North.